What's up, everybody? My name is Christian Briones. I'm ordained pending a call in the United Church of Christ, and I have the honor and privilege of participating in Park Avenue Christian Church's Hamilton Sermon Series. And so I hope you will find today's message engaging and encouraging and enlightening in some way, provocative, and in some way challenge all of us to live our lives in a way that's more consistent with the good news that Jesus came to bring us. So the text that I'm going to be preaching from is from the book of Ecclesiastes, and it is from chapter 3, verses 19 through 21, then chapter 4, verses 1 through 2. The text is as follows. For the fate of humans and the fate of animals is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and humans have no advantage over the animals, for all is vanity. All go to one place, all are from the dust, and all turn to dust again. Who knows whether the human spirit goes upward and the spirit of the animals goes downward to the earth? Again, I saw all the oppressions that are practiced under the sun. Look, the tears of the oppressed, with no one to comfort them. On the side of the oppressors there was power, with no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who have already died more fortunate than the living who are still alive. The word of the Lord. The historian Karen Armstrong writes in her recent work, A Short History of Myth, on how archaeologists have unearthed that there is strong evidence to believe that humans dating back to the Paleolithic period were already beginning to imagine stories and myths and narratives to cope with the mystery and the anxiety of what the meaning of life might be, with what we are doing here and what happens after this life. Religion is one of the ways humans attempt to alleviate this anxiety, the anxiety of these questions that we've been asking for since at least 20,000 BCE. I know that it's true for me. In my own journey, I found the Christian faith like someone who was hungry, and only by the grace of God had I stumbled upon bread to eat. It was in the Christian faith that I found purpose, that I found identity, I found a global, ancient community. I found hope. It was there that I found the divine. Indeed, our religions are one of the many ways we attempt to make sense of the world around us. There are many contemporary day narratives and myths and non-religious stories that attempt to grant us wholeness and happiness. The narrative of capitalist American culture is that through economic achievement, one becomes successful. The narrative of love and romance in this culture is that through romantic love, we find completion and we find wholeness and we find happiness. The narrative of, I don't know what to call it, like new agey, millennial, pseudo-irreligious culture tells us that positive thinking and through sending all the good vibes, we can attain wholeness and we can attain happiness. Narratives have a concrete way of affecting the ways we choose to live our lives. There is a song on the popular 2016 award-winning musical Hamilton entitled Right Hand Man that tells the story of a young Hamilton who has bought the narrative that he will be glorified and he will be honored if he goes to war, and even more so if he dies a martyr because of this war. Like many other youth born into poverty, he says, as a poor kid from the Caribbean, I believed fighting was the only way for me to be something. It was the only way to rise up. However, the general that Hamilton is working under sees something else in young Alexander Hamilton. He assures him that that is not the only narrative that is available to him. general says to young Hamilton, "Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder." Dying is easy, young man. Living is harder. There is something else for you, young Hamilton. There you are gifted in many ways you don't understand. He sees in him gifts that could be utilized in a more fulfilling way, and from then on, Hamilton becomes the general's right-hand man, hence the title of the song, Right-Hand Man. Narratives have a way of shaping the very trajectory of our lives, down to even the most seemingly minuscule decisions. But what happens when those narratives are not enough? Because if we want to grow and we want to be nourished, at some point we're going to need something more than bread. I would argue that this is something that the author of Ecclesiastes has realized. This text in Ecclesiastes is resonant because I read the author of this text as the words of someone who, for them, the attempt to make sense of the world has failed. The narratives that the world has offered are simply not enough. The author says, "Humans have no advantage over the animals. For all is vanity, all go to one place. We are all from the dust, and to the dust we're all going to return." And I think the dead who have already died, they're more fortunate than we are. The author here struggles to see why one should choose life, why one should keep living. This is a common experience for those who battle depression. I speak as someone who battles depression, has battled suicidal thoughts, and battles general anxiety, and I can't help but read these words and read this text as an ancient record of someone who shares this struggle, someone who knows what this is like. I know how deep and vivid hopelessness and despair people who struggle with depression feel, and I admit that on the bad days, the beautiful and hopeful life-giving words of our Christian faith sound like cheap and aimless noise. Some of us know what it is like to be stuck on Good Friday all weekend long, extending into weeks and sometimes months later. Where I find hope and where I find resurrection is that a conversation of mental health is starting to surface. And I have faith in a church that will begin to speak a narrative of healing. We'll speak a narrative of healing into that conversation. But I also want us to mourn the many humans made in the precious image of God who have taken their own lives. And may their brave souls rest in peace. Today, people of God, we say no more. Today, we say that there is healing for you. We say there is hope for you. We say there is life for you. Healing is something our whole selves need. Our physical, our mental, our emotional, our spiritual health are all intertwined, entangled with one another. Healing is holistic. It is everything: physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. When I was in undergrad, I was starting to have pains in my chest and a kinds of like tightness in my chest and some sharp discomforts. And I thought I was having heart problems. And so that was incredibly terrifying, because that is. And I finally went to a doctor And the doctor came in after getting EKG results back, and he said to me that there was nothing wrong with my heart, nothing physically wrong with my body. And I didn't understand how that was true. And we began to have a conversation about what I've been feeling and what's been going on in my life. He was talking to me like he was my boy, just talking to me like a counselor would or like a friend would. And at some point, my faith and my religion came up as a topic, and I told him it was something that I had been wrestling with, something that had given me a hard time. I told him that years ago this was something that gave me hope and that became the very foundation for my existence. This was something that gave me fire, and that it didn't do that anymore, and I didn't know why. And he looked at me and said, "Christian, I think this is about your faith." And I was confused, and when he said that, and I asked, could it do this much to my physical health? And without missing a beat, he said, "Absolutely." And from the tone of his voice, he seemed to find the idea of faith just like comical, but like a priest. I kid you not, like a priest. He spoke life, and he spoke healing into my body and into my spiritual life that day. He named the anxiety that came with an inconsistent and with a faith and with a religion that no longer made sense, a narrative that no longer fit anymore. The narratives in our lives have physical effects on our bodies. And because I know this to be true, I have began to implement a narrative of healing in my life. And although I continue to struggle, I continue to have general anxiety, and I continue to have depression, and I probably always will. It's a lot better today than it was then. And I have hope because of that. The poet Rupi Kaur writes, "How naive of me to think that healing was easy. When there is no end point, there's no finish line to cross. Healing is everyday work." As I was writing the sermon, I couldn't help but wonder what happened to our friend who wrote this text in Ecclesiastes. I hope they began to live into a narrative of life. I hope that they found a narrative of hope. I hope they found healing. People of God, let today be the day that we say no more. Let today be the day that we declare hope. Let today be the day that we declare life. And let today be the day that we declare healing. Amen and amen.